Okay, so today I wanted to talk about that impossible to lose weight. And that's what this whole week is going to be about. It's going to be talking about some ideas on that impossible to lose weight. And for most of us, that impossible to lose weight, where does it sit? It sits around the abdomen. And you might have experienced you go hardcore and you really work at doing a diet. And the minute you get off that diet, boom, that weight comes right back. Your abdomen rebounds like you hadn't been on a diet at all. And there's almost nothing you can do to slow the ever expanding abdomen. Why is that? Well, I can tell you in Chinese medicine, that is because that relates to phlegm, and phlegm is totally a nightmare to get rid of. And if you go out to my YouTube channel, you're going to find some information on phlegm and what it is and how to deal with it in the body. Really great information. And then if you want to take it even further and get really detailed on how you can use foods as herbs and pick foods that actually eliminate that phlegm in your body, then go out to my website at best-acupuncture.com. So best-acupuncture.com and click on the clean eating program. You'll see an icon for clean eating. Click on that. Schedule some time with me. Let's see if that program works for you. Okay, so in Chinese medicine, the foundation of it is phlegm, but there's something more behind that, and that's what I wanted to talk about today, which is the Dai Mai. And I think that there's enough information in here that I'm going to have to split this up into 2 episodes. So we'll do this one today, and we'll try to get the second one in before the end of the week. But if we can't get it in before the end of the week, then we'll try and get it in on Sunday or, right at the beginning of next week. Okay, so let's talk about the Dai Mai. And what is the Dai Mai? So the Dai Mai, it's one of the 8 extraordinary vessels. And you're saying, like, what is the 8 extraordinary vessels? Well, you can get a lot more information of this on my YouTube channel, Best Acupuncture LLC. But to give you some highlights, what the 8 extraordinaries are is they are another channel system in the body. So if you've been doing acupuncture or if you're familiar with Chinese medicine, you know about the 12 primary channels, right? They're the channels like the lung, the spleen, the heart, the liver, the large intestine. They're the ones we hear about all the time. But there's more to Chinese medicine than just those primary channels. There's a number of other channel systems, and one of those is the 8 extraordinaries. And what's really unique about the 8 extraordinaries is that they're really the first channel system that's created in our body. So if an egg is fertilized, an egg's fertilized and it splits, when the zygote, which is that fertilized egg, splits, that first split creates 2 of the 8 extraordinary channels. That's the Dai Mai, that's the Dimai, and the Ren Mai. And then it splits again and it creates the Dai Mai. So as that zygote splits, it will create all 8 of the extraordinary channels. And from that, they say that all your life is created from that. So all your genetic inheritance comes in with those 8 extraordinaries. All your life lessons comes in with those 8 extraordinaries. Your life plan comes in with those 8 extraordinaries. And there's a lot more to it, but we're going to focus on one of those, and that is going to be the Dai Mai. And let me think here. So these 8 extraordinaries, they're going to be part of classical Chinese medicine. You don't see them that much in traditional Chinese medicine. Now, traditional Chinese medicine, that was created during Mao's time, right? So that was created in the 1900s. And what that was it was a watered down version of Chinese medicine. It focused on the physical and some of the emotional, because at that time, Mao really wanted to be accepted by the West and with Western science. And Western science really didn't appreciate the spiritual and the emotional aspects of Chinese medicine.
No way!
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. Most of this stuff was written out of the medicine in the last century. It's still in classical Chinese medicine. So you'll see that there's a lot of practitioners here in the United States that are looking for more answers to their life, to our meaning of being here, to healing ourselves, realizing that healing ourselves is more than just our physical body. There's this mental, emotional, and there's this spiritual aspect to being healthy. And so you're seeing a lot more practitioners reaching out, reaching back into time to understand that was cut out during Mao's time. So 8 Extraordinaries comes from that time long ago. It's more focused on the leg of Chinese medicine that deals with Taoism. So there's 3 philosophies that really outline Chinese medicine. That's Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism. And this really sits well with Taoism. And the thing that's really interesting about Taoism is it appears that Taoism was a philosophy of life. You know, how do you live your best life? How do you do the life lessons that you're supposed to do? How do you participate in this world and do exactly what you're supposed to do so you can have, I guess, a good death or a better next life? And if you don't believe in reincarnation, then that's okay too. How do you live your best life so that whatever you give on to the next generation is better than what you had? And that's really what the philosophy of Taoism is about. And there is a religion of Taoism, and that was created around 200 AD. And there's a whole reason why that was created and why this religion suddenly blew up. But it's not a religion like we see with Christianity and Catholicism. So it really still becomes a belief in how to live your life. So all of these 8 Extraordinaries come from that part of Chinese medicine, that philosophy of Taoism, how to live your best life. So how in that part of it talks to your genetic inheritance, reincarnation, if you believe in it. It talks about how you store emotions. So what about this Dai Mai? So where is it located? One of the really unique things about the Dai Mai is it is going to be the only one that is horizontal. All the rest of them go up and down. All the rest of the channels go up and down. And then some go sideways, like the low collaterals go sideways. But this one actually is the only one that wraps around the body, and it wraps around the abdomen. So let's see here. Okay, so if we look at this here, it wraps around the abdomen right where the belt buckle, where the belt would go. And do you notice anything unique about that? On most of us, our weight sits on top of where that belt would go, and our belly just expands over it and hangs over our belt buckle. And that's the break where the Dai Mai is. So it's almost like this Dai Mai has stopped energy right there in the middle of our body. And in essence, that's kind of what it has done. So let's talk about what the Dai Mai does. Now, there's going to be an episode out on my YouTube channel on trauma, bullying, and low collaterals, which talks about how do we first start to store trauma in our body, trauma that becomes overwhelming, that, we can't deal with it at this moment. We might be able to deal with it a little bit later, but right now we can't deal with it. How does the body deal with that? And the first thing that it does is it's going to push it into the low collaterals. And so check out that episode if you want to know about where trauma first gets lodged in the body and how that can affect you. But if emotional issues stay with us longer than the low collaterals can support them, they start going in deeper. And they start going into the spleen, the stomach, the liver, those 12 primary channels that you know so much about. And that's where you start seeing heartburn, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, heart disease. And when it gets even more severe, when the trauma gets more severe than that and it has to go in deeper, it gets shunted or it gets pushed over to this Dai Mai. And what happens when too much energy gets pushed into a location? In Chinese medicine, they say when too much energy gets put someplace, it stops the energy flow. It's almost like, I kind of think of it as if you have a water hose, there's only so much water you can put through it. Look at some of the dams that have been breaking over the last few years because so much water has come down. And so there's only so much water that can be held behind that dam before it starts to put pressure on the walls that are holding the water in and starts breaking those walls. That's the same thing that happens with trauma in the body. So the first place that it's going to go is the low collaterals. And then if something keeps on happening and it keeps on causing us trauma or keeps on impacting our emotions, it's going to overflow those low collaterals and it's going to start going into our body organs. And then if it still is happening and we're still dealing with that trauma, then it's even going to go in deeper. And that's where this Dai Mai comes in. That Dai Mai is like the last opportunity to change what's happening in your body. And so all these emotions, and these emotions are going to be those things that trigger you, those things that you just react in this world. You just react to it, or you don't know why it's happening. You don't know why you're thinking this way, but you can't stop yourself. It's those things that have become so entrenched in your psyche that they keep on going deeper and deeper into your body. And the Dai Mai is where it starts mapping into your genetic inheritance. It starts mapping into, if you believe in reincarnation, where you get to take that lesson that you weren't able to process in this life, and you get to try and work on processing it in the next life. So here's the thing. When I started realizing that our emotions, this is like the last bastion, the last defense before these become an issue that we have to either pass to our next generation or pass to ourselves in our next life. That's when I started realizing the extent of energy that we're pushing down into this Dai Mai. And when we are pushing in too much energy, that energy just starts getting backed up. It starts getting blocked, and we start expanding around the middle. And then we do these hardcore diets and we lose all this weight. But what's causing your your gut to expand, that wasn't addressed because no one ever thinks that your emotions would be ever part of the problem. So as soon as you stop that diet, boom, everything comes right back. Now, let me see here. One of the things that sometimes this is really a hard, sometimes we have a difficult time connecting our mind and body because that's not how we think about it in the West, right? In Western medicine, the body is really separate from the mind. And we see it in how they treat the body, how we treat disease, how we give out pharmaceuticals only to stop the symptoms instead of addressing the whole person and the whole body and the whole constitution and the whole emotional being of that person. So to think that emotions could be part of the reason why you have an ever expanding abdomen, I could see where that could be a difficult one to swallow or a difficult one to say, okay, I can see how that's happening, but how does that happen in other ways? How does a body help us to handle excess? I mean, is it set up even to handle excess? And I think one of the key ones that ties right into this is the concept of overeating. You know, the first time you overeat, it's not a big deal, right? Because you're still so healthy that you can still get rid of that excess food that you ate and not a big deal. But if you keep on overeating, your body is not going to be able to eliminate all that extra food. You know, initially, what it'll do is it'll say, okay, that's more food than I need. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to store it for you. I'm going to store it in fat cells because we all want some of those. And so I'm going to store all this excess food that you've been eating in fat cells. And we're really happy that it does that because if it doesn't do that, what would happen? Well, it would just sit in our gut and it wouldn't move until we needed it. We'd be like a snake, you know, we'd have to go to sleep for 6 months after a big meal until our gut was able to process it. Or if we couldn't go to sleep and we thought we were going to eat some more after that, what would happen is we would ultimately put too much food into our gut and we'd kill ourselves. So the fact that, you know, our body is willing to help us out here and go, oh yeah, so you overate. I am going to take that extra food that I don't need. And what I'll do is I'll store it for you. And I'll store it in fat cells so that when you need it later, you'll have it. And that's great. Okay, thanks. But the thing is here in the West, what do? We overeat every day. That changes the whole equation. So each day we overeat and we add more food and we add more weight and we store more weight on our body. Well, when the body has too much food and it can no longer handle it, then what happens? Well, you start seeing things like high cholesterol, kidney stones, heart disease, heartburn, headaches, you know, all of those symptoms that come in before you get a really serious disease like cancer. And so that is just one example of how the body helps us deal with excess from a very physical perspective. And then we have to wonder, well, okay, if the body's just dealing with this from a physical perspective, what happens with the mental and emotional things? Because this body is how we interface with the world. Wouldn't that have to have some sort of participation in our mental and emotional interactions also? And in Chinese medicine, they think they do. So when the emotions or when the excesses become too much, that's when they get pushed down into the Dai Mai, which is that neat channel, the only one that goes around our abdomen. And that's when it gets pushed into this Dai Mai and starts blocking our area there, and the weight just starts expanding for us. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea of what the Dai Mai is, where it's located, why it's getting impacted. And what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here, and what we'll do is in the next episode on this Dai Mai, I'm going to talk about food, and I'm going to talk about how we process foods. So to give another example of how it's going to impact the Dai Mai and what's happening in the Dai Mai. And then we're going to talk about why food can be really important in changing this. Why it can be really helpful in allowing you to release anything that you're holding with the Dai Mai. So, okay, if you have any questions, put them in the comments below, because this was pretty superficial and there's just so much to this Dai Mai. Okay, so thanks for listening, and next episode we'll go over the rest of the Dai Mai.